Hello, this is John Patrick Mullen of SOMAFINANCE, the world's first globally compliant multi-asset DEX, issuance, and lending platform. And I'm on the Edge of NFT, the world's favorite NFT podcast. It's always keeping you up to the cutting edge of Web3. Stay tuned.
Hey there, NFT curious listeners. Stay tuned for today's episode and find out how SOMAFINANCE did the impossible and formed the world's first globally compliant multi-asset decentralized exchange.
And why today's guest feels his emotional intelligence is such a powerful part of his personality.
And how iPrivata is making it easy to own yourself in Web3. All this and more on today's episode. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Edge of NFT podcast with your hosts, Jeff Kelly, Ethan Janney, and Josh Krieger. We aim to bring you not only the top 1% of what's going on with NFTs today, but what will stand the test of time. We explore the nuts and bolts and the business side, but also the human element of how NFTs are changing the way we interact with the things that we love. This podcast is for the futurists and dreamers, the disruptors and creators, the fans and connectors, and the makers and doers that are pumped about this ecosystem and driving where it goes next.
Today's sponsored Spotlight episode is brought to you by SOMAFINANCE and features its co-founder, John Patrick Mullen. SOMAFINANCE is the world's first globally compliant multi-asset DEX, issuance, and lending platform. John is a fintech entrepreneur, investor, and educator living in Hong Kong. Besides SOMAFINANCE, he is also co-founder of Mantra DAO, a popular decentralized finance platform. Prior to this, he served as the managing director of Tritarian Capital, a FINRA-regulated boutique investment bank focusing on providing financial services and capital raising solutions for startups and SMEs. John also has a traditional investment banking background, having worked at Gaotai Hunan Securities in Shanghai, China. As an educator, he has spoken at leading universities across the world, including Harvard, London Business School, and Peking University. John, welcome to Edge of NFT.
Thank you very much, guys. Glad to be here, and good work on the pronunciations. I know some of those Chinese ones are.
I just went with it. Yeah.
Hey, man, you did a good job.
Thank you very much.
I was impressed.
Good work, Ethan. Yeah, we always try to trip them up, I throw a couple bogeys in there sometimes, see what happens, but you pulled through.
You did indeed.
So John, welcome, man. Yeah, look, dude, you guys have quite a deep bench over there, man. They're your co-founders, team members, banking, crypto backgrounds, like super solid. Some of the deepest experience we see in the space. How did you bring this crew together? How did the concept come to life?
Yeah, thanks so much. To be honest, it's been a work in progress for a long time, and it's been kind of iterated upon, and finally we've kind of, I don't want to say stumbled upon the creation of SOMAFINANCE, but it really kind of was a bit of things happening and then not working, and then finally we got it just clicked, and it kind of all came together. Or at least it's all coming together. So a bit of a background. So basically, we met the team, or the kind of our other co-founders, Bill and Jim, in a prior kind of crypto exchange business that we were working on. I want to say like 5-6 years ago. I mean, it was relatively early on. And around that time, we kind of had this idea to create a regulated multi-asset exchange platform that could, basically trade a number of different types of asset classes, whether it was cryptos, equity, stocks, commodities. Back then, you didn't really have NFTs, but in theory, you could have traded NFTs too, and a bunch of different other things. But again, this was all like in a centralized exchange model. And we basically went out and was like, okay, the Tritarian guys have this broker-dealer license. We have kind of like the crypto experience. So it's really this nice combination of the two sides. There's a little bit of an age gap, but we all get along really, really well. So that works. But that's good because they have the experience, and we're a little bit more in the weeds with the crypto bros. But anyway, so we went out and we were like, okay, let's go take this license that they have from FINRA and this broker-dealer license, and let's go do exactly what we're saying we're going to do, utilizing this license to issue and distribute and do all this stuff with the securities license of this brokerage firm on a centralized exchange. And we went to FINRA, which is the self-regulatory body governing broker dealers, and they're like, nah, do not do that. It's not the same. It's crypto. It's blockchain. Like totally different. Stop, cease, desist. this kind of thing. So a 2.5 year process later, roughly, we finally got the go ahead to get this license, and we actually created a pretty new and special license together with FINRA, essentially. And since then, we believe we're pretty much the only ones who have the full breadth and depth encompassing of what license that we have. And this means that we can essentially connect both institutional as well as retail market participants through the type of offerings that we can do, as well as doing it on any different chain. And that's extremely important because, it means that you're not just doing these things, which are effectively construed as securities in the United States, but just let's call them like tokens for the time being. You're issuing these tokens on a permissionless blockchain ledger. So it's on an Ethereum, it's on a Solana, it's on, something like this, rather than being issued on a permission chain like a Hyperledger. So you had the ability to connect both the retail and the institutional guys, and then you could do it on a chain that everyone was familiar with. So that really kind of allowed us to then say, hey, we can do, all these types of DeFi activities that people are already doing on Uniswap and Compound and Aave and all these other places, but we can do it in a compliant environment and utilizing the existing kind of regulatory body and framework that we have to then be able to do this kind of, I don't want to say necessarily the right way, but a way that is perceived to be the right way by the regulator, at least.
Right. Dude, such a big, that's a big hurdle too, just to overcome, right?
Took a lot of time.
Anybody that's ever looked into that, like world of FINRA and regulation and compliance, like it's no small, even for doing work like the traditional work, right? Like SEC regulated work or, financial work, being a broker dealer, any of that stuff, like in the traditional sense, is hard enough. But then you introduce crypto to it, forget about it. It's like through the roof difficult.
It throws them in a whole nother loop. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, creates a sustainable competitive advantage when you think about the possibility of like doing that versus like, let's just change our model. Like that would have been like the path, I think, 999,000 people would have taken versus let's look at FINRA. That sounds like a fun time.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there was a lot of education throughout that process on, teaching them how this stuff works, and there still is. There's still handholding. That being said, they really legitimately are looking for a way to say, hey, we're not the bad guy always. Like our job is, at least in their mind, and what their purview is to protect the U.S. retail investor. Whether that is actually protecting them in some cases, maybe not. That's debatable, but that's their job, right? And they're just doing the best they can. They're bureaucrats, end of the day, and they're trying to do the best they can. So it is a process. I mean, that's why it took so many years to finally get something, and it's still going to take some time. That being said, we believe that through that process of working with them to kind of come together with this license, as well as educating them about the kind of the technology that we're building, we've gotten them a lot more comfortable with what we're doing. So we don't foresee these huge hurdles, going forward. We actually see that, as the regulatory kind of bodies and framework begin working together a little bit more in the United States, we actually see a path towards, ideally something that's a little bit more friendly. And at least in our mind, it's going to be friendly and conducive to actually protecting the retail investors, but still giving them access to the things that they want, which is the DeFi, the NFTs, like the yield farming, the cool things.
Yeah. Sort of like having overprotective parents and, just letting them know, hey, I'm going to go to this party. It's going to be fun, but I'm going to be responsible and I'm going to get home at a reasonable time.
That's a very good analogy. Yes.
and having like 9 other siblings waiting in the wings saying, please do this for me.
Absolutely. I mean, we honestly do think if this is done properly, the way that we're doing it and brought to market and then scaled properly, it can really, really be quite a unique and big thing.
Well, it's pretty exciting, man. So we're talking about first globally compliant multi-asset DEX and token issuance platform. That's a lot there. What does that mean from the user perspective?
Sure. Good question. So basically kind of the way that we're doing it is you have a user experience that's akin to a kind of a DeFi environment. So that means you're essentially logging on or connecting to our platform. We'll have both a web-based as well as a mobile platform via some sort of Web3 decentralized wallet, whether that's your MetaMask, your Ledger, your Coinbase wallet, whatever will allow you to connect. And then you connect to the platform. So basically, again, you're holding your assets in a non-custodial manner. So we don't actually custody most of your assets. And I say most, because the one thing that we do have to custody is if you're bringing us the traditional real world assets. So let's say that you're basically going to be trading some tokenized versions of Tesla's shares on our platform. You might be having a tokenized version of Tesla in your wallet, which would be called S Tesla, but the actual backing of that asset, the real world asset, the paper security, we hold in custody. So for every S Tesla token that exists in our world, in our platform, you're going to have a real share of Tesla in the background. So what that means is that not only can you do all the fun things, have the composability of trading on an AMM, yield farming with it, swapping your Tesla for Google and then for Bitcoin and then for whatever, but you also maintain ownership of the actual underlying asset if you have it in your wallet, right? So that means you get the actual dividends. That means you have the actual voting rights. You have all these different things that are the good part about having it in the real world, but then you get the better, that's maybe not better, the additional good part about having kind of the functionalities that blockchain enable, let's call it like that. So basically, again, you have this Web3 experience, but you have, real world accountability, real world, assets that are just being brought onto a kind of a Web3 environment. I guess the other thing that is important to note is that because we are doing this in a quote unquote compliant way, that does mean that we will also have to go through an AML, which is anti-money laundering, and KYC process, just like as if you were, signing up for your Coinbase exchange account. Honestly, a very similar process. But the way that we do it is that we create a kind of like a walled garden around our system or our products, and then everyone has to come through this kind of, let's call it compliance choke point or bottleneck. And they have to basically say, okay, this is my wallet that I'm going to be interacting with the system with, and this is my kind of personal information that I would use for any other exchange platform and whatnot. Actually, one thing we want to do is actually create an NFT of this identity so you can go use it in other places. But that's another thing we can get into later. But once you're in, you're kind of in, and then we can know, hey, John's from America. He's an accredited investor, non-accredited investor. He can interact with all these different products, and he can interact with this one because maybe that's for non-US people only, right? And we can basically permission them at the very lowest level, which is the smart contract level, so that only the people who have been approved by us can actually interact with the various products on chain.
Sounds pretty nice. Like it.
Thank you.
Elegant solution.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to that, Josh's comments about tackling something that seems a little bit hairy. Stuff like that always reminds me of like a company like Stripe, right? I mean, people that get processing credit card charges, for websites. It's relatively boring. There's a lot of regulatory stuff you got to go through and get through that. But if that's the domain you want to get into, there's just so much potential opportunity, and it's kind of like just being the guy that can last the longest in the fight, kind of, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's like you brought up Stripe, and I honestly think it's a good example. The reason I'm saying that is because really what we're trying to do in essence on a lot of stuff is abstract all that compliance and kind of the plumbing away, so that you're just interacting with this interface and it's going to be easy for you to use, but you don't actually have any clue what's happening in the background. And it's some complex shit that's happening in the background, both on the compliance side as well as on the technical side. So it is a pretty interesting analogy you made there.
So how does the SOMA token weave into all of this, and what's the utility there?
Sure, great question. So I think the easiest kind of like maybe explain that you can have is SOMA token is an exchange token, right? So it's not too dissimilar from a FTT, which is the FTX token, or a BNB, which originally was the Binance exchange token, right? Or even Uniswap, although Uniswap doesn't really do anything at this point other than governance. But it's meant to be in a token that governs and kind of takes part and is supposed to have economic value accrual through the exchange or through the platform or through the various products, right? So that's the fundamental kind of core. But the tricky thing here for many of these things that I just named, these tokens that I just named, is that you're treading that fine line between being a utility token and not being construed as a security. Because if you're being considered as a security, and this depends on your jurisdiction, of course, but let's just use the US, for example, because honestly speaking, most things in the US are securities. Almost everything, actually. But anyway, most things are securities, right? And you want to be able to try to avoid being construed as that because you're trying to avoid all the compliance overhead or registration or all these other things that essentially are bread and butter, right? So we're just straight up saying, hey, at least in the United States, and irrespective of all these other places around the world, in the United States, we're issuing this as a security. I'm really trying to move away from the kind of the acronym of STO or security token, just because I think it has a little bit of a bad memory from the 2018, 2019 days of being the next big thing that never turned out to be. And the reason why, in my opinion, was because there was no retail involvement. There was no real DeFi. There's none of this stuff that actually makes it makes it useful today. But anyway, so basically we're issuing it as security, which means we can have all the elements that would make it a security, meaning we can straight up pay dividends to our token holders. We can straight up do buybacks and burns. We can do all these different things that the SEC would be like, oh, you're a security, or it's like, hey, we don't care. We're going to issue it as we're going to issue it, and we're going to do it compliantly, but we're going to do it in a way that, again, is retail friendly, that has one unified smart contract across all countries. So it's not like you're doing different token tranches for US versus the EU versus whatever. And this is a pretty powerful thing. So again, if you can have all these economic levers of value accrual, whether it's fee rebates or dividend payments or buybacks and burns and these types of things that really are oftentimes avoided in many places, like Uniswap just straight up will not turn on the fee switch, because they know as soon as they do that for the Uni token, while it might make the token go to the moon, it also means they're immediately a security in the United States, and Uniswap's based in the United States, Uniswap Labs or whatever the name of their entity is, and they don't want to get into that regulatory risk. So we're just like, hey, we can do it. We're going to call a spade. And I believe personally, if we're able to gain any semblance of traction across the number of very interesting products that we're going to be launching with, in theory, the revenue and the kind of the potential for dividend payments on these tokens should be immense. That is not financial advice, but gotta.
Immense is a relative word, yes. So, just one follow up there. It's maybe a more complex question than I want it to be, but what does that entail? Is it just that the SEC can watch you however they like? Do they check in at a regular clip and you have to kind of report quarterly? What does that tend to look like when you say, hey, this is a security, even though it's not like a stock or something?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a very good question. I'll try to make it like relatively simple. I won't go too in depth because it can be pretty in depth. But basically, you have to do a couple different things, and it is all about reporting and generally how you're offering the actual asset itself. So depending on how we're offering it. So essentially, we're offering it to a bunch of different types of investors. US retail, for one, we'd be doing under what's called the Reg CF, so regulation crowdfunding. And then the Reg CF exemption, we can sell securities up to $5 million to US retail investors. So we can sell $5 million worth of SOMA tokens to the US retail guys in one tranche, I'll say. Then you'd combine that with a Reg D, which is for US accredited investors, a Reg S, which is for international investors, and they all have various trading restrictions if you haven't registered it after, done a registration statement. So basically, like how it'll work is we'll fundraise, we issue all these tokens, we'll then register the token itself, and actually once you've gone over a certain amount of token holders, it's actually construed as a public security. And I don't know exactly off the top of my head. I believe it's like 2,000 token holders, which 100% we're going to have over 2,000 token holders. So we're going to have to register it, and we'll have to do some audits and different things and reporting requirements. But essentially, there's a kind of an interesting difference. Is like there's people think that going public means you're going to go on NASDAQ. There's a difference between going quote unquote public and being listed. That is a very big difference, sure. Right? We're not listing necessarily on NASDAQ, but we are going public.
Seems to be like a major difference of liquidity potentially, right? With something, but if you have liquidity on some crypto exchange, maybe you don't have a huge difference with liquidity.
Well, hopefully we won't at some point in time, for further down the line. But it is an interesting thing because obviously getting listed on NASDAQ, the requirements there are significant, right? Companies take years and years with all types of reporting and compliance requirements to get listed on something like a NASDAQ or an IC or whatever. In our case, it'll be a little bit less stringent, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to at least hold, at least to ourselves to a similar standard, of the things that we're trying to, achieve with the token and the projects that are going to be on, on the exchange.
Yeah, totally. Well, it sounds like you guys are, that's for sure. Like really high standard here. We want to go a little bit deeper into the roadmap here in a moment, but let me ask just from a 30,000 foot view, current market conditions, like what are the high level problems that you're trying to solve? And what are some of those like 30,000 foot solutions that we haven't touched on yet?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really easy to just kind of break that down maybe by product. And I think when you talk about the issuance side of things, that's the very good easy place to start. So essentially, we just kind of touched on it a little bit with capital raising, right? So I think particularly for the U.S. market, you've never really been able to, as a U.S. retail investor, legally access primary token issuances, right? Whether it's an ICO, STO, whatever, let's just call them token issuances. You've never been able to access them. I can't buy into token offerings. They either block U.S. investors fully, or they require you to be an accredited, which is not the majority of people.
Dude, how many coin list like offerings were like 100x freaking returns, and we saw them, we knew they were amazing, but we couldn't touch them. It's like crazy.
Exactly. Oh, exactly. It is crazy, and essentially what our licensing and what our platform will allow us to do is to just straight up say, hey, we can do this. We can do it properly. We can directly sell to U.S. retail investors, which we think is going to be a huge opportunity, particularly as some of the people and partners that we're working with, they're creating these very interesting tokens, which are across all different elements of not just Web3, but just in culture in general, whether it's in sports or music or entertainment or art or NFT projects or whatever it may be. There's very interesting tokens that can be created with very, very high quality IP, high quality brands, high quality people behind them that can then now sell directly to the U.S. investors. But because, again, what we talked about, we're selling them as securities in the United States. There's these economic levers that can be switched on that you've never been able to do before. So let's just use a simple example of not saying that this is happening tomorrow, but let's just use a sports team that wants to sell maybe 1% of its equity, right? Or 1% of its future royalties or revenue or whatever. You couldn't do that before, but now you can legitimately sell that to your fan base, and they can have a legitimate share in the ownership of their favorite sports team, right? And you don't think that's going to incentivize people to want to go to more games, want to buy more stuff at the stadium, buy more merch, and then tell all their friends about it, so they're doing the same thing, and it's going to be kind of like this snowball effect of sorts. And we think that you can do that in any industry. So I think that's a very interesting thing, both for the retail guys who can now invest in these things, but also for issuers who can now directly engage with a lot of their kind of retail fan base in the United States. So that's one kind of thing. On the DEX side, again, now you have a compliant place to trade all these things, which I think is going to be interesting. And you can trade crypto assets, you can trade NFTs at some point in time, you can trade these kind of quote unquote securities, and then you can trade tokenized equities and all these different things all in one place. So that we think is also a very, very cool thing, because again, most places don't have the ability to do that. I mean, some of the exchange platforms in the United States have tried to put tokenized equities on their platform, but they haven't been able to do it, properly, or with the right licensing behind it. So that's one thing that we think is interesting. And then I think the third one, which is very, very interesting, which is the retail kind of yield and lending product that we're going to be launching is. And something that you've seen in recent weeks and months is many of the larger kind of retail focused lending and yield providers, whether it's a BlockFi, a Celsius, a Nexo, a lot of them have come into regulatory trouble. They've either been getting huge fines, settlements, or even just completely walking themselves back from even offering products like Coinbase, for example. Coinbase was going to launch Coinbase Earn. That was the 4% on USDC product. And then they got hit by the SEC with a cease and desist, and they didn't end up even launching the product. But again, because of the licensing that we legitimately have, we can do that. So we can issue retail-focused yield products to the U.S. retail customers who are not going to be able to access these products anymore on other platforms. And we think that's going to be very, very, very interesting as well.
Very, very cool. Let's sort of frame this up for our listeners in terms of your roadmap for 2022 and where we are at this present moment in time. So complete liquidity round fundraising, is that completed, or is that next on the list?
So we'll be planning to, so basically, yeah, maybe just even a step back. So we took, we raised a seed round, I think roughly end of last year, but we announced it in early this year, which was $6.5 million led by Animoca Brands, with participation from GSR, Kinetic Capital, Griffin Gaming Partners, and a bunch of others. And we're going to be finishing our what's called liquidity round within this month. That's another $15.8 million. And then we're going to move on to the retail offering, which we'll do through a combination of a Reg CF and a Reg S for the international tranche. So depending on how that's going to go, the offering could be sizable because we're actually going to probably do some sort of Dutch auction within the public sale.
Very cool. And then what happens after that? Are we going to get into this DeFi yield farming sort of world that we were talking about?
Yeah. So kind of the next steps is after we complete that process, we're going to start, basically going through the issuances of other projects as well. Whether that's, a fan token or a sports token or a music token or an NFT project, we have a fairly sizable pipeline across, a number of different verticals. And obviously once those have gone through those processes, they'll then be listed on our DEX. They'll then be offered, yield farming opportunities, staking pools, all this kind of fun stuff.
All right. Very cool. Yeah, life is definitely more fun with DeFi and yield farming, at least in my humble opinion. So what's after that?
Yeah, so good question. So once we do that, we're kind of working in two different veins, right? So we have both the technical and kind of product specific vein, which is launching the DEX itself, launching other functionalities on it, limit orders, options, futures, other different types of asset classes, commodities, et cetera, et cetera. But then you also have the compliance side as well, which will be working in tandem, and that's going to be offering and acquiring new opportunities to get new licensing essentially. So whether that's through money transfer licenses or MSBs or, a bit license or other types of banking licensing, this will all be working as well in the background. And one thing that's kind of interesting is, the money transfer licenses will allow us to then be able to, facilitate the transfers between, crypto assets such as Ethereum, Bitcoin, et cetera, into cash, via a DEX. So in most cases that's not possible just because, with a fiat integration, you would need some level of KYC. And obviously we have that. So, you don't normally think of fiat getting onto a DEX, but we will be able to kind of facilitate those transactions. That's done through money transfer licenses. Obviously, so we're pretty kind of confident about being able to kind of cover the bulk of the United States very, very quickly.
Very cool. And then when you mentioned this first ever compliant token, on the issuance platform, what's that all about?
Well, so that'll be kind of what I was alluding to. Like we're going to have all these different fan tokens, all these other things that are come through the platform. SOMA obviously will be one of those tokens as well, but we're not really going to be launching the SOMA token itself until we kind of want to wait for the full suite of products. So that would mean we can already do the issuances as well right now, but we want to add the actual DEX itself as well as the lending product, so that when we launch with the SOMA token, there's going to be a lot of stuff you can do with it. So you're not kind of like waiting for all this to kind of come to light. So we're expecting this to be in the coming months, the full launch of everything essentially.
So John, I think we're going to need to get you back to LA. I know you were here for NFT LA into the Upgrade Labs protocol I'm going through, because you're going to need some serious data wave production and recovery efforts with this type of ambitious roadmap.
I'm down. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Nice. All right. We can be trading some theta waves on the DEX at some point, maybe. I don't know how that works, but so what else do you have on the roadmap for the rest of 2022? We've got through, Q1 here. We're into Q2. What can we look forward to? Sure.
Yeah, so I alluded to a couple of the things, but I think kind of like the second part of the year that we're going to be looking at is obviously other chain integrations. So we're launching initially on Ethereum. To be completely frank, that's just the chain that the regulators are the most familiar and comfortable with. But that also means that we can then, move from that onto other EVM compatible options such as, Polygon, Avalanche, et cetera.
Scale, we got to give the crew at Scale a little bit of love too.
We can listen. I'm blockchain agnostic, even though we're building our own blockchain. So that should tell you something about how I feel about various layer one wars and whatnot. I think that it's very interesting to have a bunch of different kind of protocols which all have their own unique use cases, unique edges, and things of this nature. So happy to we'll look at Scale as well. but yeah, so we'll be launching on a bunch of different EVM compatible chains. I just mentioned that we're building our own chain, which is a kind of an EVM as well as IBC compatible Cosmos Tendermint chain called Mantra Chain. So that'll be launching, I think, testnet this month, and then obviously mainnet a little bit later on, and that'll actually be one of the first major integrations of chains to the Soma Dex and Soma Swap platform. Obviously, there's big reasons for that, not just because of the actual, because of this other product, which we think is very cool, which is actually the retail yield product that I was kind of alluding to. Essentially, how it works is you raise dollar-based capital, whether it's USDC or some other stable coin, which then gets kind of put into various other yield opportunities, whether that's through a proof of stake kind of validator node opportunity, like maybe we go buy a bunch of Luna and stake Luna, or buy a bunch of Sol. But then you're earning some yield on that. You're locked for a certain period of time, but then after that period of time, you actually get this. The token becomes essentially seasoned. So after a year, the token's been seasoned, but you've been earning yield the entire time, right? What that means is that now this token is freely tradable, and potential kind of targets like a SPAC can come in and be like, hey, I need to raise $10 million, and you have a tranche of $50 million in this Luna pool. Do any of your investors who have just been earning 10% or 5%, whatever it is, want to then take a piece of this into like our seed round, right? So you get a kind of like a warrant into this new deal. You can say yes or no, you don't have to, or you can just get your yield and come out. But it's going to be a liquid trading token, so you can actually trade this token, as a warrant for these kind of other token shares, essentially token shares. So that's going to be very cool, and that's also going to be all kind of tied in with MantraDAO, which is another project I'm a co-founder of, because we have a validator business, we have a chain that will obviously support all this stuff. So we can really kind of cross-pollinate and tie in a lot of this stuff together, which would be pretty awesome.
Well, I kind of get the feeling you're like, clearly you need a big team to do all of this stuff. We have a lot of stuff, about every single aspect, and you're sharing about it in great detail. I think this is like what your dreams are like. You just go to sleep and it's just like, you've got all of this working on in your head. You've got the full plan, like rattling off constantly. It's pretty incredible.
Oh, thank you. I mean, to be honest, I wish I remembered my dreams. I don't ever remember my dreams. But maybe that's a good thing, because this is my brain 24/7 when I'm awake, which is often. So maybe it's good that I'm not thinking about this stuff, at least overtly, in my dreams, because it's kind of 24/7 otherwise.
Or maybe, John, this is a dream.
It's entirely possible. I don't know. We got some trippy backgrounds going on.
That's true. But look, man, all really cool stuff, amazing stuff, great roadmap. One of the things we like to ask our guests is where you draw your inspiration from. Like, what's happening in the space these days in the world of Web3 that inspires you on the daily?
Good question. I mean, there's so many kind of cool projects and cool things being built, and there's so many smart people coming into the space that it's like honestly hard to keep up. I think one thing that is just a good way to kind of just keep on the pulse, and this is maybe a good thing for business, maybe not a good thing for my mental health and time, but spending a lot of time on crypto Twitter, to be honest, and NFT Twitter, and you really just kind of see all this different cool stuff. And even when there's like crazy things happening, we kind of were talking a little bit about the other deeds land mint earlier today. Like, even when that was happening, like, there's so many different ways that you can kind of see different perspectives, and it teaches you like, hey, maybe this is a good thing to consider when we're doing some sort of mint down the line. So I think spending time on Twitter, that's maybe a little bit of a cop out. I don't know if that's inspiration, but just kind of like seeing what the lay of the land is there. But then honestly, I mean, it's I think from an inspirational perspective, a lot of it's just, go ahead.
I'm gonna help you, because like, you guys have been big fans of a lot of the social impact projects in the space, right? And I think that's worth mentioning. And when we talk about everything that we talked about, NFTs are definitely part of your roadmap. It's definitely sort of fits the same sort of structures and frameworks that you're building. But I think you guys have taken sort of a liking to some of the social impact use cases for NFTs, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think there's so many very interesting use cases for both NFTs and tokens and things of this nature that when done properly can really affect a lot of very cool change. And I think that's really kind of one at the core, like that's kind of the inspiration for a lot of this stuff is doing it the right way and kind of, I don't want to say like, we're not attempting to give the space a good name. That's like a little bit true altruistic and out there for what we're trying to do. Obviously we're a for-profit business, and we expect to make a lot of money, and we expect, a lot of these things that, to grow and to become into, massive kind of movements. But if you can do good things along the way, and a lot of that through supporting social justice causes, or even just like, being part of some of these kind of up and coming, artists or athletes or whoever, that part of their story, and kind of give them the opportunity to use Web3 to their advantage. And that's also a very cool thing. I think that's something that we think will be honestly some of the bread and butter. Like tokenizing a portion of a sports team is not going to be a deal that's going to happen all the time in the beginning, but you might be able to create a bunch of different very cool sports tokens or things for, people who are, trying to create a local basketball league, or they're trying to fundraise for some special event that they're trying to create, in some maybe lower income area, right? So these things are all very cool, and I think will be a little bit more frequent than like these big kind of like marquee deals, and I think that's also very important for us to consider.
That's about impact, right? In a lot of ways, right? It's
absolutely
not necessarily like the absolute number or dollar or whatever in some of these things, right? It's like, what's the intrinsic impact, right? It's really cool.
For sure. And the thing is, it's not completely altruistic. Like we may issue these tokens and help them do this thing and help them do it in a compliant and right way. But at the same time, and maybe our fees are almost even pro bono to a degree. But if we can get on, maybe 5,000 people from this various community to then come and trade on our platform, because, this is like a cause that they're getting behind. And then you do that tens of hundreds of times over, that's again, a snowball effect that we want to create in terms of bringing people onto our platform and becoming aware of what we're doing.
Yeah,
so these things are all
line.
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah, man. Look, some of the biggest influences in the world tend to spin from and grow from for-profit ventures, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Having a social mission in addition, really cool stuff. And I do have to do like a throwback to like the early days, like a year ago, in some of our early episodes, just when you talked about like kind of spending that time in crypto Twitter, and it's hard, which is hard to do, right? Because just time is hard, but you could go down the rabbit hole, and it's a fun rabbit hole to go down. And I think probably the first person that really talked about just like spending so much time on there and highlighting some of the people he followed was this guy Roman Tironi from Zed Run, and he was one of the first folks that really talked about just doing that and going in there and just having fun, following the Ja Rules of the world, or guys that, like early on, you might not have thought he had good alpha, but he was on point in so many different ways. He still is, right? It's a fun thing to do. I wish we had more time of the day to spend in there and just be part of the community in its truest sense,
One of my favorite Twitter profiles is Val Kilmer. The one and only. Jeff and I met him at one point in the past, and he's doing his own things in NFTs. He loves the community. He's like right there in it. Really fun guy. So
cool dude.
If you got an extra few minutes, check out Val Kilmer on Twitter.
And speaking of Zed Run, we got to give a shout out to Purple Elf, of course, our horse. We still have Purple Elf, right? We didn't get rid of Purple Elf.
Yeah. She's still in
she's still in the stable.
Horse.
She's in the stable. It's a small stable. Actually, I think there's a new horse racing game coming out, so maybe we'll integrate her in another stable for another horse racing game. Why not?
She's our girl. Go check her out. Give her some love. Give her some likes in Zed Run if you're listening. So we appreciate it. Anyway, brother. Well, look, we appreciate all this amazing info. Soma Finance, guys, check it out. This is a killer roadmap, killer team, well positioned to go execute against this thing. We expect big things, man. I mean, you're already doing big things, but we're going to keep a close eye. We appreciate you.
No pressure, bro. No pressure, but we're watching you, John.
I'm on the white list.
You can just think of us as like
episode here.
You can think of us as like the godparents.
So look, man, let's take a moment though and shift gears. We'd like to get your personal perspective on some questions. We call them Edge Quick Hitters. It's kind of a fun, quick way to get to know you a little bit better. They're short, 3 to 5 word responses, but we'll go a little deeper here or there.
Sure.
10 questions. You ready to dive in?
Ready to go.
All right, let's do it. Question number 1. What is the first thing you remember ever purchasing in your life?
So I was thinking about this, and I think it's probably like candy or ice cream, or going to a store where I would have my own like allowance money to go actually buy something.
Isn't that the best? At first time,
Back
right?
in the day, I mean, I'm in my hometown right now, so I think maybe that's why I'm a little bit more thinking like in this line of thinking.
Yeah,
Vanilla,
whatever you
chocolate,
remember.
strawberry. What do you think?
I liked chocolate. Yeah, I like.
I just
chocolate.
remember those
But
like push pops, the like
I
citrusy
like that,
kind of
but I
thing.
still like gummy worms for whatever. I like gummy stuff. But peach ones are also super good.
There you go.
All right, next one. Number 2. What is the first thing you remember ever selling in your life?
Lemonade.
Nice.
Lemonade stand. Good old lemonade stand.
And that was your own lemonade stand?
Probably me and my sister, maybe one of my neighbors.
All right.
Yeah,
Did you
joint venture? Got it.
Did you have
Joint
any
venture.
kind of special sort of sales strategy? Were you doing bundling or sort of discounts in some
Oof.
way?
To be honest, like I think my sister and if I was doing it with my sister and my neighbor, they were probably doing most of the selling, and I was doing most of the drinking, and then just running around being a menace, because back then I was a little bit rambunctious.
Nice.
Well, would have been on top of if you went to the local government and registered your lemonade stand as a business. I think that would have been appropriate.
Maybe we can do a lemonade stand token on Soma.
There's something in there.
There you go.
Question number 3. What is the most recent thing you purchased?
Recent thing, I think it's probably the flight that I took back to come to Cincinnati, where I'm at, because I left on like Sunday morning. So I imagined it was that, and I haven't really gone out and bought anything since.
Nothing else. Okay, right on. That's a nice one. Question 4. What is the most recent thing you sold?
Almost certainly an NFT
Okay.
or some sort of crypto token. It was definitely either selling crypto or.
So I actually think that John generally doesn't remember, because I've been in that world where it's all kind of a little bit of a blur.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, just in terms of blur, like we're doing audits and stuff for our company at the moment, and we had to go back and we had to look at every single crypto transaction that's ever occurred from like all of our company wallets, personal wallets, and all this stuff. And I'm just like, I have no idea when I sent $5,000 to the company and then they sent me back like $2,500. I don't know what this stuff is for, right? So
Yeah.
I've done thousands of these transactions in my life, and it does blur.
Yeah, man, it's a tough one. All right, question number 5. What is your most prized possession?
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably aside from like family related stuff, whether it's pictures or heirlooms or things like that, probably my watch collection.
Now, is this date, how far back does this watch collection go?
A couple years.
Couple years, yeah.
Back. Yeah, a couple years back.
I don't know.
When I could actually afford nice watches.
Right. I have some friends that started getting into it, like maybe probably like 4 or 5 years ago. They started getting in, tried to rope me into that world. I mean, I love watches. I love, collecting things. I didn't pick up on it. Man, it seems like the market took off.
It's gone crazy.
Yeah.
It's pulled back a little bit just in the last like month or so, but it's been
right?
pretty. To be honest, I see it as like a tangible hedge against my digital life and assets.
I like it. Okay.
But did you get one of those NFT watches that they're
not.
hawking? No.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I do know. So I do have some projects that I do know some projects. Like shout out to this one 4K from Richard Lee.
Yeah.
He's got a project that's like NFT based. Luxury assets, whether that's watches or I think you can even buy cars. I mean, you can buy like crazy stuff. So I think there's a use for it, to be honest. I mean, I would love to be able to buy more watches with crypto.
Yeah.
Rather than have to like constantly cash out and then buy with cash.
Dude, I love to buy more of everything with crypto. It's crazy, man.
Amen to that.
Like, Jesus, so many, dude, we've been like dealing with banks and all this stuff, man, and limits and, oh, dude, craziness.
Painful.
Yes. But I digress. We continue. Question number 6. If you could buy anything in the world, digital, physical, service, and experience that's currently for sale, what would it be? What do you got your eye on?
It's a very, very, very tough question. I think one of the things that I've been looking to buy most recently is an apartment in New York City. So I'm normally based in Hong Kong. Our SOMAFINANCE JV partners are based in the kind of the outskirts of New York. Not exactly New York City, but I've always wanted to live there. My sister lives there, and I'll definitely be spending more time there. So I think an apartment, if I could just buy it outright, would be dope. So I wouldn't necessarily always have to worry about renting it and have a mortgage and stuff.
Yeah, man. Great one. Question number 7. If you could pass on one of your personality traits to the next generation, what would it be?
I would say generally my kind of EQ for people, understanding of humans and people, and just kind of feelings about people. That would be that's who I am. So that is through all elements of my life. So I think that's an important one.
Super important. Absolutely agreed. Question number 8, flip side. If you could eliminate one of your personality traits from the next generation, what would that be?
So if it was up to me, I would say probably, I'm an Aries. I'm born in April. We are known to be able to have a little bit of a temper from time to time. I would say I'm 99% of the time even keeled, but I can light up pretty quick if I'm not pleased. So maybe get rid of some of the temper. If it was my wife answering, she'd probably say the working all the time.
Yes, that one.
Actually, a lot of people would probably say that, not just my wife.
Yeah,
A lot of people would say that.
I think we got the real answer then.
Yeah.
Question number 9. What did you do just before joining us on the podcast?
I went shopping for some ingredients for dinner with my parents, and then we voted in the Ohio primary election.
What was the most interesting ingredient that you purchased?
To be honest, I was working when they were shopping, so I was like on my phone the whole time.
Hence the real answer to question number 8.
Yeah. And the master delegator, the parents will always do whatever you need in a pinch.
Sure. No, that being said, the flip side of that question is the place we went was very interesting. So we went to this place called Jungle Gyms in Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio, and they have everything from all over the world. So they have like all the kind of crazy international food. You get samples of everything. So I think maybe that's why I was a little distracted. The samples and the
So were you just like walking around on your cell phone, like doing business and eating samples? Is that exactly? I mean,
I wasn't on the phone. I was just texting.
Oh, you were texting, texting and sampling,
and actually looking at the questions for this chat.
Hey, all right, brother. Well, we're at the end. Question number 10, last one. What are you going to do next after the podcast?
Gonna have dinner. I think put on some of the basketball games, and I have a couple more calls. So there's basketball and there's hockey. I'm a huge sports fan. So NBA playoffs and NHL playoffs are starting, and I have a couple more calls, and then go to bed because I have a 7:00 flight tomorrow back to New York City. Busy
guy. Well, hey, that's Edge Quick Hitters, man. We appreciate you sharing with us as always. Good time for sure. Word on the street is that we have an interesting hot topic. So like on the subject of like KYC and AML, there's some really interesting stuff here. Ethan, let me pass it over to you, man.
For sure. Athletes, artists, musicians, famous people can declare "I own me" in reference to their digital identity in a legal and technical construct called a declaration certificate in an iPrivata community of trust. Link this DECE cert with any new digital asset and be able to prove the non-fungible asset is theirs. Uses this approach to prove I am me and I own me and my assets in a court of law by using a disciplined chain of custody approach, which timestamps all assets in the community of trust distributed digital identity management system. Link this proof of trust to any NFT on any platform and any currency to substantiate the long-term value of the asset. And lucky for us, we have Scott Yeager, Chief Strategy Officer of iPrivata, here with us today to discuss this hottest of topics. Welcome.
Welcome. Thanks. I appreciate y'all having me. And we pronounce it iPrivata, like IP, private IP.
Got it.
It's my IP.
Got it. Love the play there, man.
Yeah.
So Scott, like we had a chance to connect out at NFTLA, and we were talking about this and the need to have such a system in place. A lot of people have been dancing around it, trying to figure this out and get something propped up. Tell us about your system, man, and why this is going to be the solution here.
Well, we filed for and have a patent on the idea that people ought to own their digital identity. And we combine that with a legal construct, with some contracts that we have, and a private network infrastructure that lets anybody declare they own their digital identity and use that patent to help shore that up legally. So that rather than relying on GDPR or CCPA kind of laws, which are really just rights, they don't really give you the ability to declare you own yourself and take it into a court of law. So we've taken that position that people ought to be able to declare they own themselves. And we're starting with athletes and with famous people, musicians, whoever, who already have something that's of value. Because a lot of people's digital identity may or may not be deemed valuable right now, but athletes definitely, and people who have a digital identity that can be monetized is a good starting point, is what we think.
My mom thinks I have digital value, so that counts for something, right?
Yeah, it does. And actually, you guys do have digital value. So more so than others, right? Anybody that has their own YouTube channel could argue that as well. And they should be able to monetize it. And they should also be able to fight it in a court of law if somebody steals it.
To be honest, even though I'm sitting here and I could see I'm in tangible form, we're all just having our digital identities communicate with each other at this point, right? Because we're on a Zoom call.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah.
And isn't it interesting too, though, in a world where, like, on one side, privacy, right, and being able to maintain that, matters a lot. There's another side of it where, because of the construct of the system, you need something like this to say, no, actually, this is me here. I own this. I own me. I own this thing that is otherwise completely private. You can't really prove it otherwise.
Yeah, we have like some athletes, like Lynette Woodard is going to be coming out later this week. She's a women's NBA Hall of Famer, and she was the first woman to play on the Harlem Globetrotters. So she's an example of somebody, she can tell you multiple NFTs that are out there where she's in them, and she's not getting a penny. So from her perspective, those NFTs aren't valid because they didn't have the root proof of trust that she would say, well, that's mine. That's my digital identity. I should have a percentage of that deal. And so, that we think that people have to start with the beginning, which is I own me, and I'm willing to protect my digital identity in a uniform manner.
Scott, how many lawyers did you guys have to consult with and are on your team to figure all this out?
Well, we have a lot, but Morgan Lewis, I happen to have a legal regulatory background because I was involved in the commercialization of the internet in the early 90s, and we built fiber networks. I got a franchise in the city of Houston to build a fiber network to compete with the phone company. Back then, you had to fight legal regulatory battles. So I went to Andy Lippman, who was our chief regulatory guy, and said, hey, Andy, if we come up with a bunch of new rules, can anybody stop us later? And it's like, no, not as long as it's private networks. And we have, we establish that people own and control ourselves and we don't break the laws. Obviously, you have to follow the laws. So we have a fair number of attorneys, both for the intellectual property and for what we would call our contracts, which are the legal construct that comes with the deal.
So I can see John here. He's probably thinking, maybe we made a partnership, or I don't know, because they got to do a lot of sort of KYC and stuff like this and deal with digital identity. What are you thinking about this project, John?
Yeah, I mean, sounds super interesting. Would love to kind of hear how you guys do what is the process that the athlete has to go through to kind of, let's just use an athlete, for example, but what's the process that they go through to then kind of own themselves, like maybe on a operational as well as kind of a technical level? Actually, I was listening to everything you're saying. Like, we would love to talk to you because our attitude is that we need to work with other players in the industry. And we have the notion of a community trust service provider kind of suite of contracts that enables a company like yours to leverage everything that we bring to the table with your customer base. But we would want to incorporate your capabilities into what we might offer to our athletes. So we have kind of like the notion of a distributed digital identity management system, because my digital identity is the sum of me out there. And part of me might be my wallet, part of me might be my Coinbase, whatever, but part of me might be my medical history or my search history. So over time, we might do those kinds of things, but we're starting with clean things initially. So what happens is an athlete would say, okay, I'm going to declare, they sign an agreement with our entity,
And then they say, I need to start tomorrow. So they'll put their driver's license, passport, birth certificate into our system, and and everything is time stamped. And that's a big deal, because when the attorneys from the other side say, well, how do we know you really did that? You want to have everything in what's called a chain of custody that you could take into court. And then once all that's done, then you sign the digital document called a declaration certificate. And that is more or less your declaration that you own yourself. And we use UN, and all kinds of global laws are referenced in that. Like, or kind of like, like people own themselves in the physical world, they ought to own themselves in the digital world. And so you declare that, you bond it to your aspects of your digital identity. And then that is the final version of a DEX cert. And then after that, you can just put that into any, hash you want, and then bond it to any other digital asset you might want. And so, an additional layer might be some of the stuff you guys are doing. And you would combine that and say, look, okay, I've already declared over here, but everything I do over here, I want to bond it to that too.
That sounds super interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think the connection, like you were mentioning, Ethan, with the KYC part, because we will have a verifiably true identity as well. So you can kind of combine that with this I own me piece, and that whether it's this wallet or whatever, that token is legitimately theirs, and it's maybe that it hasn't been hacked from maybe that WNBA player. And then they're trying to go take advantage of that. And where in our case, we know that it's actually a wallet controlled by this person. And then you have the verifiable, ID behind it and all this stuff. So I'd be happy to, let's talk offline. Absolutely.
There
Definitely.
you go.
That's
Make deals.
Yeah. We love that type of pairing live on the show. It's a lot of fun. So if I want to own Ethan, or if I want Ethan to own himself, where does he go? What's next for him, John? Yeah. What's next, Scott?
So
let's hope the
we're
first thing that they do when anybody comes to them asking to own another person is say, no, thank you.
I think we would say that's against the law.
But if I wanted to try to own Ethan, and then your KYC caught me, what would I actually be doing there?
Well, so what would really happen is, because the part of doing athletes and other like musicians first is the workflow process that we've developed is still in the de facto standard setting mode, which means that, for instance, would you first enter your passport and then bond it to the DEX cert or whatever. Once you go through that process and then create what we call an e-bonder, where someone's able to use that digitally in other places, then we are really just working with those athletes initially. We're not really today trying to sign up consumer-facing people yet, because we want an athlete to maybe draw in their fans later. And those would be the first time that we'd actually start having the public be involved in this.
Very cool.
So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, totally. I think we just have to track you on socials to keep in touch with what you're up to.
Oh, definitely. And like I say, you're going to be hearing about us through the athlete channels, really, because we have several athletes that think that they would like to have their own campaign, like I Own Me, and let people know that they own their digital identity.
Very cool. Yeah. And specifically, we'll get some social links and a website. Make sure to get that from you. I want to encourage listeners. You touched upon something very briefly. Go check out another episode we did where we talked with Brittany Kaiser, and you sort of vaguely referenced this idea of how much of us is digitally out there, all the way from our medical records, right, to our photos, and they're on these social media websites and this and that. And she's got some very interesting projects. We'll be spending some time with her at Davos coming up here soon. She's hosting the crypto house there, but just trying to help people manage like what they own your data, right? And some data you actually want to share, right? There's some stuff that you want to be out there. You want to be open. You want to be open in a way that creates value for other people without hurting you, and then having awareness around those things that you don't want to share, and knowing that you have a choice and how to execute that. So that's a very interesting conversation we had on a previous episode. Listeners may enjoy that. But Scott, just before we run, let's send people to exactly where they need to go to find out more about you.
Our website is iprivata.com. And, we're very cybersecurity focused too. We kind of glossed over that, but we think that you need to have minimum cybersecurity standards in our legal framework and minimum privacy standards. And so as a result, we're not so social network aware now. Fox Ellis, our sister company that is part of Privata, is where all of that is happening. But as far as iPrivata is concerned, our website is iprivata.com. It's iprivata.com.
All right, we'll go check it out. iPrivata, own your identity. Scott, thanks so much for joining us, man. We really appreciate it. Best of luck to you, man, and we'll stay in close touch, okay?
Thanks a lot. We'll see you.
All right, brother.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you. Very cool. Man, iPrivata, really exciting stuff, guys. So real quick, we normally take a moment to do a little fan and listener shout out at this moment, but I think we want to do a little shout out to a colleague of ours who we collaborated with actually on one of our projects that you'll learn about here very soon. A little app that we built, maybe not so little, but it's pretty fun. And we did it in part in collaboration with her class over at Pepperdine University. She used to actually be the director of blockchain at Pepperdine University right up until just about, it was.
She got fired.
Just not at all. Just up until last week, I think Lene Martin, amazing person, amazing leader, amazing educator. And if you head over to coinbase.com and you look at who's heading up Crypto University over there,
you're going to find,
you're going to find her name in there. It's an amazing role she's taking on over at Coinbase, heading that entire process up over there. Massive moves happening, and not a better person you can imagine in the world to have in that position and to help Coinbase take their education, at least starting internally, but we know where that'll head to the next level. So congrats to Lene Martin. Yeah. Big ups. So little shout out for today. So, man, John, amazing episode, man. We appreciate you joining us here. We want to make sure that all of our listeners know how to jump on the Soma Finance train if they're not there already. So where can they go to follow you and all your happenings?
Yeah, good question. First off, thanks for having me, guys. It was a pleasure. Looking forward to continuing to follow up down the line as we launch more stuff. And I know we'll be seeing each other physically, not just digitally, in a few more places around the world in the not too distant future. So looking forward to that. So I guess the best places to get in touch with us are our Twitter. So SOMAFINANCE Twitter. The other one would be obviously Telegram at the moment. So just look up SOMAFINANCE. You can actually just ping me directly if you have any questions at JP Mullen on Telegram. That's a pretty easy one. Or a website, SOMA.FINANCE. So yeah, hit us up on any of those. We're going to be launching a new website pretty soon, so you get the first version of it now if you go. And once you're on the website, make sure to sign up for our wait list. I think we have over 500,000 people signed up for it so far, which is a lot. And hopefully that'll be even more soon. So yeah, and then actually, I think one of the next things you're going to be asking, we maybe can talk about a little bit how to get some people on the wait list.
Let's go. Let's jump right into it, man. So we got a little giveaway that we're going to be doing here. We'll have more details here real soon. But yeah, do you want to share a little bit, John, about what you had in mind there, some of the triggers to get people in the mix?
Well, I think we can do a couple things. So maybe what we can do is give up a couple whitelist spots. So like almost like a guaranteed whitelist spot to participants. I'd say guarantee with an asterisk because they will have to pass KYC. Yeah. But outside of the KYC part, we can definitely put some people up into that list, which would be awesome.
Yeah.
And then we'll think of something on a little bit more fun level as well.
Cool.
Whether it's some NFTs or something. I need to talk to our marketing team. But we'll get something going on that as well and give something away. But definitely we'll get get some whitelist spots going on. And I hopefully you were talking about the record is $100,000, but hopefully our whitelist spots will be worth more than that at some point in time. So let's see.
Awesome, man. Yeah, pretty popular spots, that's for sure. Yeah, well, we appreciate it. So folks, follow us closely on our socials. You'll see the details come out there. Keep a close eye. Invaluable whitelist spot for sure, and then some other goodies. So please keep a close eye. All right. Well, I think we've reached the outer limit at the Edge of NFTs for today. So thanks for exploring with us. We've got space for more adventures on this starship. So invite your friends and recruit some cool strangers. They'll make this journey all so much better. How? Go to Spotify or iTunes right now, rate us and say something awesome. Then go to edgeofnft.com to dive further down the rabbit hole. Lastly, be sure to tune in next time for more great NFT content. Thanks again for sharing this time with us today.
The views and opinions expressed on the Edge of NFT podcast reflect solely those views and opinions of the show creators and its guests. We're learning as we go, just like you. Please make sure to do your own research. Our podcast is not financial advice. There are multiple strategies and not all strategies fit all people. You understand that you are using any and all information available on or through this podcast at your own risk.